Welcome. My name is Marshall Brown, and I'm a career and executive coach. I'm all about helping people to get clear, get focused, and get ahead. What I'd like to talk about today is what makes a powerful resume. People often say to me, Marshall, I've got this resume, but I'm not sure if it's effective or not. So what I hope to do today is to cover some tips that will help you create the most powerful resume you can have. So let me start by talking what a decent resume is about. It's a well-written document. It clearly outlines your skills, your qualifications, and your experience. But a powerful resume, and that's what I'm going to encourage you to have for yourself. A powerful resume, it's very focused, it's an aggressive marketing tool. The problem that I see when I look at hundreds of resumes is that people have a tendency to write it from the perspective of what they have to offer. What you want to do is you want to be sure that you're writing your resume from the perspective of what is the employer looking for and how your skills match their qualifications. Prepare your resume with the company's requirements in mind. That's what's going to make a powerful resume for you. Sell what they are buying. You know your skills, you know your education, you know your attributes, and you know your accomplishments. Match that with what they're looking for, with the skills that they're looking for, with the education, the attributes, and the successes. And where those two meet, where those are in alignment, that's what's going to create a powerful resume for you. So make sure that you've done your skills inventory. Make sure you know what your successes are. Look for what they are seeking in the job description. Match those two. That's what's going to give you a powerful resume. I want to spend a few minutes talking about the sections of a resume. And I'm going to make some general statements here, but these are typically the types of sections that you see in a resume. And I'm talking primarily about a chronological resume, by the way. First part of your resume is all about your contact information. So you have your name, your address, your phone number, your cell phone number, your email address. Let me talk a little bit about email addresses. You want to be sure that you're using a professional sounding email address, not your kid's name at gmail.com. You also want to be sure that you're not using your employer's email. Have a professional sounding email address, as well as, by the way, voicemail. Whether you use your home number, your cell phone number, make sure that your kids aren't on the answering machine or that your dog isn't barking on the voicemail. Make a professional sounding voicemail for yourself. So that's at the top of your resume, your contact information. Next, typically we see a profile or a summary of qualifications or a career summary, whatever you want to call it. But it shows the breadth of your experience. So you might have a few lines of your resume and then strengths include, and you might have 6 or 8 bullets for what your core competencies are, your core skills are. And what's nice about doing it this way, let me give you a tip here. What's nice about doing it this way is that you can have 10 or 12 of these skills in your computer, and based on the job description, you do a cut and paste. So if the employer is looking for skills in A, B, C, and D, and you have those skills, that's what you focus in on your summary of qualifications. Next, you're going to list your professional experience. Typically, it's in a chronological format. People often say, Marshall, do I put my title first or the name of my company or organization first? And what I suggest is you lead with your strength. If your title is going to carry more weight, if it's going to be more relevant than the name of the company, then lead with your title. And the same thing applies if the weight is going to carry more for your employer, then list that first. Typically, though, it's your title first. And then you would have your education after your professional experience, your affiliations. So if you are a board member or you're affiliated with an association, if you're a member of an association, show that on your resume as well. It shows a commitment to your profession. So I highly encourage folks to put any type of affiliation or volunteer activities on your resume as well. And then you could have an other section as well. I strongly encourage people no more than 2 pages. And be sure, by the way, on your second page, and I know this sounds simple, but be sure you have your name and page 2 on the second page. So 2-page resume. By the way, no I's, me's, my's. We know it's about you. You don't need to have that in your resume. I'm often asked, Marshall, should I have a objective in my resume? I'm a believer that unless you perhaps are just starting out in an industry, you don't really need an objective. Think about it. Why else would you be applying for the position if your objective wasn't to get the job? I think it's much stronger, and by the way, I've talked to human resource professionals about this, it's much stronger to lead with a summary of qualifications at the top. Show the breadth of your experience. Hone in on what they're looking for. If you don't engage them in this summary of qualifications, most likely they're not going to read the rest of your resume. So have a strong summary of qualifications. When it comes to your professional experience, lead with your active verbs. Designed, managed, directed, supervised. Lead with your active verbs, not responsible for or successfully led, but led successfully. Lead with your active verbs. Typically, hiring managers look at the top of your resume, your summary of qualifications. If you engage them there, then they'll scan the left-hand side. They'll look for your active verbs. Bring your active verbs out, left-hand side. I also would suggest, people don't have the time to read like they used to. So do bullets instead of paragraph formats. So I'm giving you some general tips here. It might not apply necessarily for you, but ask around. Ask other people their opinion on your resume. Keep in mind, you're probably going to ask 10 people, and you're going to get 12 different responses. I'm a firm believer this is your marketing tool. You're the one that has to feel comfortable with it. So the days of having one resume and making photocopies of those and sending that out, those days are over. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your energy. Don't waste your money in having one resume. You have to tailor your resume the best you can to the job description. And I know some of you might be thinking, well, Marshall, I don't have the job description. Well, then it's your responsibility to use your network to find out what the problems, what the challenges of the organization are, so that you can tailor your resume the best you can. I've talked about more or less a chronological resume. For some people, and I strongly encourage you to have some assistance with this, for some people it might be better for them to market themselves based on a skills or a functional resume, where you highlight your skills versus your professional experience. I do see some people more and more using this type of format because they're selling themselves on their skill set. I will also tell you that hiring managers typically aren't used to seeing that kind of resume, and in the past that was perceived as, well, what's this person trying to hide? But I do see more and more, especially since people are transitioning more and more based on their skill set, not necessarily what they do bring to the table, but their skill set. So let me tell you a little bit about a functional resume, or a skills resume. This is one that typically hiring managers aren't used to seeing. In the past, people were using a skills resume or a functional resume if they had something maybe to hide, or if there was a gap in their experience. But as more and more people are changing industries, business sectors, and they're positioning themselves more in their skill set versus their employment history, I am seeing more and more of the skills resume. So that's something you might want to consider as well. Again, you want to be very careful with the way you position yourself with a skills resume, and I would encourage you to talk with perhaps a professional resume writer. There are certified resume writers out there that you can hire to help you put your resume together, and you want to be very careful though when it comes to writing a functional resume. Next, I want to talk about the importance of keywords. So what is a keyword? Keyword is typically a core competency, or it's something in the job description that employers are looking for. So you want to hone in on what the key words are of the position, and that's how you want to market yourself. Assuming, of course, you have those skills, use that language in your resume and also, by the way, in your cover letter. It's also important to use keywords these days because all of the scanning that people are using when it comes to reviewing resumes. People typically don't have the HR assistant to go through the first stack of maybe 300 resumes and to pick out 10. So many companies, organizations are using scanners that will scan how many times a certain keyword appears based on what the hiring manager or the employer put into the system. So you want to be sure that you know what the keywords are and that those keywords appear several times in your resume. Because based on how many times they're going to appear on your resume, that will increase your likelihood that that resume will come up to the top. So how do you know what keywords to use? Again, look at the job description. If you see words that are being repeated over and over again, those are typically keywords. Those are the words you want to be using. Knowing the core competencies of the industry, that will also help you to identify what the keywords are. And again, you can't just put those words in once or twice. You want to have them repeated over and over again in your resume. Using language that sells. You can't just say anymore, increased sales of corporate security services. That doesn't mean anything anymore. What you want to be able to say is something like, increased corporate security sales by 43% and secured 12 new enterprise accounts, generating over $16 million in new revenue. That says something. That shows results. You can't just say conducted vendor negotiations, which reduced expenses. Use language that sells, so it would be something like slashed expenses by 23% within 6 months by renegotiating key vendor contacts. Again, it's using language that sells. So let's talk about the language that I would encourage you to use in your resume. You want to be sure you're using aggressive and confident language. This is your marketing tool. This might be the first time that someone actually sees what your accomplishments and experience and skills are. So you want to be sure that you're using confident language and aggressive language. Action-oriented. Earlier I talked about using active verbs. That's what I mean by being action-oriented. Led, directed, manage. And you also want to show benefits and results. It's not good enough anymore just to say that you supervised, or you led, or you directed. You've got to show not only that you did something, but what the results are. You might not be able to show results for everything on your resume, but the best you can, show results. Managed a staff of X amount. Increased revenue by 25%. That says something. Past behavior is an indicator of future behavior. So if a hiring manager sees where you have increased revenue by 25%, you've increased membership by X%, that's an indicator of how you will perform for them. So show action verbs and results. Be as specific as you can as well. Sell the context. Sell what it is that you have to offer. What are your accomplishments? Some people, actually, in the resume, will have an accomplishment section in the beginning as well. Again, it highlights what your successes are. Regardless of the way that you put your resume together, you want to be sure that you're highlighting your accomplishments, showing your successes, leading with active verbs, and showing results. A few tips on formatting and layout. Be consistent. Right? If your subject headings are bold and underlined, make sure each one are bold and underlined. Create enough white space. Right? Make sure you're not using a lot of bolding and fonts and italics these days. I'll tell you, the way that you see your resume on the computer, on your screen, might not be the same way that it gets transmitted and then the hiring manager is looking at it on his or her screen. So I would encourage you to use a simple font. Use a Times Roman numeral or an Arial. Don't use a fancy font. unless you're applying for a graphic designer position or something like that, where that would add additional credibility to your resume. Keep a simple font. Don't use a lot of italics. Don't use a lot of bold. I see a lot of resumes where people are bolding things, and it gets to a point where everything's in bold, and the bold doesn't even matter anymore. So don't use a lot of bold, and don't use a lot of italics. I've been asked about computer formats and what's the best way to transmit my resume. I would encourage you, obviously, using Microsoft Word is a great way to do it. Some people are using PDF because it locks in the system. It takes a picture of your resume. I will caution you though, I'm hearing from more employers where their technology people won't allow them to download Acrobat, and therefore they might not be able to open up a PDF resume. So what I would suggest you do is you send it in a PDF. You also send it in a Word as a Word document as well. And I would send those as an attachment, by the way. In the body of your email is where your cover letter is going to go. Let me also give you a tip about your computer format. I would encourage you to send your resume to a few people. Have them look for spelling errors. Have them look for grammar errors, as well as how they were able to receive and what it looked like on their computer. Earlier I said you can't just assume that the way your computer looks, that the way your resume looks on your computer is the same way it's going to look on the person who's receiving it. So send it to a few people. Spell check doesn't pick up on every error. So have them look for spelling mistakes. Have them look for grammar errors, as well as allow them to give you feedback on how it transmitted. Give you some final thoughts on creating, again, a powerful resume. That's what you want. Sell what the company wants, not what you want. Page 1 is critical. If you don't engage them there, they're not going to read the rest of your resume. Use the language of your target audience. So if they're looking for skills in A, B, C, and D, that's the language you want to use. And this is really critical for people that are looking to transition from one sector to another. Use their language. If they have to figure out, okay, well, this is what I'm looking for, this is what this person brings to the table, how do those two match? They're not going to do it, most likely. Okay? You've got to do the work for them. Put it in the language that they understand. A 2-page resume typically is a good guideline. Okay? It's not a rule, though. Again, this is your marketing package. You have to do what's important for you. Make certain your name is on every page. I know that's simple tip, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do that. Avoid using the I's and me's. Again, we know it's about you. Organize your content to work for you. And what I mean by that is, assuming that you do get in for the interview, you want to be sure that you have the same successes and the same results on your resume as your stories as you speak them. Tell them what they need to know. Show them how you're the best person to help them solve their problems. And I can't stress this enough. Proofread, proofread, and proofread. And then have others do it for you. This one is from a client we had. His name is Richard Bosch. I'm showing you this one because I want you to get an idea of when I was talking about summary of qualifications. In this case, we called it a professional profile. But this shows the breadth of his experience. We also use selling language in this resume. Okay? Proven human resource professional. Significant accomplishments. Again, this is selling language. This is what you want to be sure you're using. Now earlier I talked about having the education at the end. In this particular case, we could tell from the job description that they were emphasizing education. So we moved the education to the front. It's very easy to do today. You do a cut and paste. It's not like in the old days where you had to retype your resume. And I'm also showing you this example because I talked earlier about highlighting some accomplishments. In the job description, they asked for a list of selected accomplishments. So again, we tailored this for what they were looking for, and we added this section in the beginning of selected accomplishments. Notice the active verbs: collaborated, deployed, developed. This is what I'm talking about when I say use active verbs. Here's another example how you can highlight your skills. In this example with John, we made it very clear in the beginning that he was a senior executive and he was in the manufacturing industry. Notice again the selling language, high performance executive. Right off the bat, you know this is not an entry-level executive. This is a high-performing executive and one who has 20 years of experience. We also put in some of his performance milestones because they asked in the job description for some of his accomplishments and some of his successes. So again, we moved that to the front. Notice how very clean and clear this resume looks. In many industries today, they want to have some technical expertise, and they ask for it in the job description. Here's a great way to show that. In this example with Christine, they wanted to know what kind of technical expertise they had. So we brought that to the front as well, and we very clearly laid it out, the technical expertise that she brings to the table. Okay, keeping in mind, that was based on the job description. So you've got to read the job description, and I would suggest maybe you even highlight some of the key words and what they're looking for, and then go back to your resume and look at, have I demonstrated significant skills and accomplishments in the areas that they're looking for. Another example I want to show you is areas of expertise. This resume clearly shows, right from the beginning, what skills Marilyn brings to the table. Now, she had several skills in her computer, and based on the job description, she did a cut and paste. This is what she wound up with, showing 12 areas of expertise. In the beginning, you see right off the bat what she brings to the table. She engaged them early on to read the rest of her resume. I want to show you an example of a part of a functional resume. I talked earlier about how you really have to be careful when you write a skills resume or a functional resume. Same thing, typically. This is a snapshot of one where we highlighted strategic leadership and fundraising and development and education and advocacy. Notice it doesn't say anything about where they developed these skills and where they developed the accomplishments. It's highlighting their skills. Although you won't see it on this, the next section would be employment history, where we would then list the name of the organization, their title, and the dates. Final suggestion to you when it comes to writing your powerful resumes, there are lots of books on the market on how to write an effective resume, a powerful one. I've listed a few here. Certainly go to your library, go on Amazon.com or any of the book sites, resources on the internet. Find a book that has some good examples in it for you. And if that doesn't work for you, then I would highly encourage you to talk with a certified resume writer. And you can find more information about them on the internet.